holiday season, you might be looking for nutritious, convenient meals to keep you energized on jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, can help you fuel up for brekkie, lunch, or dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. They just drop them at your door, people. You'll save time and eat well. You'll stay on track with your healthy lifestyle while taking all of your holiday to-dos in stride with good meals in the tum-tum. If you're too busy with all this stuff, these meals are easy to get done. They taste great. All you've got to do is head over to factormeals.com/expandingreality50 and use code expandingreality50 to get 50% off. That's code expandingreality50 at factormeals.com/expandingreality50 to get 50% off.
A choice right now, between fear and love. It's just a rock.
Out of the dark night of ignorance and into the shining light of truth.
Expanding reality.
A population of citizens capable of critical thinking.
We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are.
There's a level of reality where everything dissolves into an ocean of energy.
We empower our experience by insisting on our authenticity.
That's very profound. Very.
Expanding reality.
Welcome to Expanding Reality. I am your host, Brandon Thomas. On this episode, psychologist, sexual educator, and a pioneer in consciousness studies, Dr. Jenny Martin comes by, and she is fascinating. Now, first of all, her website, her podcast, Why Didn't I Know, as well as her book, Jesus' Secret Saying About Sacred Sexuality, are all going to be linked down in the show notes. She is amazing, and you guys will love this. So on this episode, we talk about the cultural distortion of sexuality, Jesus and Mary in the Bible as archetypes for the Matrix movies, as well as sacred sexuality, sexual empowerment, the re-envisioning of sex, which is highly important, and of course, psychedelic states of consciousness. So before we get to this episode, let's talk about the resource links located down in the show notes. You've got Food Forest Abundance down there. Get your freedom from fear on, guys. It's empowering and it's amazing. Also, if you want to start your own podcast, could not recommend it more. I can help with a jump with the Libsyn link down in the show notes. That's 2 months for free, so it gives you a great head start on your new endeavor, and good luck to you on it. Godspeed. I highly recommend anybody who wants to do it, go ahead and just do it. It's the coolest thing I've ever done, so try it out. Also, located down there is going to be our Amazon affiliate link. If you are going to feed that beast at all, just run it through that link. It's the same damn thing. It shows up as a browser, and it helps the show. Also down there is going to be Opus, the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support, a phenomenal resource, so definitely check that out. And lastly, we have expandingrealitypodcast.com. That's where links to all of the socials, all of our lives are replayed there. If you don't catch them the first time around, they're replayed for free on the website. Also, the Too Hot for YouTube. So many cool things going on there. All the collaborations, and he shows up in a guest on, or panel spots, Union of the Unwanted, all that kind of stuff. All of it's linked absolutely for free over at the website. If you do want to support the show, there is an option to do that as well, and highly grateful. Thank you. So let's get to this incredible conversation, guys, with Dr. Jenny Martin. All right, ladies and gentlemen out there, listening world everywhere, welcoming to the show, we have Dr. Jenny Martin, and I am so excited to get into this with you. You and I have been riffing here a little bit before we got going, and you are so cool and so interesting. So I cannot wait for my audience to get to know you better. So on that note, do you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. Well, thanks. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much, Brandon. I love what you're doing. It's so important to have these types of discussions too. It's really very cool. And about myself, well, I'm on the same journey of expanding my reality.
Come on. I love when people do that.
It's an exciting time to be alive. It's a time where we can question everything. We can question what we're being told. So many people are really looking at the narrative and looking at, okay, the last couple of years, maybe we weren't exactly told what we thought was the truth.
What?
And
no.
Yeah. And now we can when we deconstruct all that, now we can create something new. Now we can create something that we're participating in. And that doesn't really answer the question of who I am. But
no, but it's perfect because we talk about the participatory universe. Had a psychologist as well, Mel Schwartz, on here. Wrote a phenomenal book, The Possibility Principle, and we are going to get into Jesus and sex in your book, which is a tongue twister, and I want to talk to you about that as well. So no, it's perfect. You're right at home here, and you know you're sexuality educator rather, but you're also a pioneer in consciousness studies, and this is something that we weave into everything because it is kind of what we're finding out. I'm sure you and your studies have found this out as well. Is it's kind of the underpinning of everything. What is your information on consciousness studies brought you?
Big topic to unpack. Well, the way that I would synthesize that is to say that we are here on purpose. We are here to co-create reality, that we are God incarnate, and we come here forgetting who we are, and we inhabit bodies, and that gives us a sense of an illusion of being separate. But the human journey is about remembering that, you know what, we just took on these flesh suits for a period of time, but it was really about, so to speak, bringing heaven to earth for us to participate in bringing a higher consciousness to the planet. And that without each of our contribution, you doing this podcast is bringing a higher consciousness to the planet, right? So we wake up, a lot of people have woken up last couple of years and realized, I don't want to work in a grocery store anymore. I don't want to be a waiter, or, not that those are, any job is honorable. And if that's what you're called to do, fantastic. But there's a sense of, am I just here to pay bills? Am I just here to go through the motions? Or is there something bigger for my life? And we're breaking free from this idea that we have to exchange our hourly time for currency. And we're breaking free to a elevated idea that, you know what? There's something inside me that the universe wants to express as me, as this individuation. And if I bring that to the planet and I bring value to the planet, there's going to be prosperity in return for that, right? And so we're breaking free from all of this control mechanism that we have to work for this employer and be a slave and do all of that. And I think this is part and parcel of us claiming our spiritual sovereignty. And yeah, sexuality is part of that. But the bigger whole thing here is, I believe we are at the time that's been prophesized for such a long time, that there will be this point in humanity where people collectively raise the vibration of the planet, and we don't live as slaves to the matrix anymore, that we live as these beings that can co-create our reality. And I believe you chose to incarnate now. I believe I chose to incarnate now. And we all did. We're like, hey, sign me up. I want to be part of creating something new. And it sucks sometimes. It's scary, because anytime you're kind of creating a new path and a new way of doing things, and it's never been done before, it's like, holy shit, what am I doing? There's no playbook for this. We're creating it. We're like the first group of people who are, some would say, okay, we've been evolved in the past too. Well, maybe so. But at this time, we are here to forge this new reality.
Hell yeah. It's been super dense for a while. Would say at least 100 years, right? 100 and some change. So we know what you mean when you say awakening and this change. And so you're right on brand here. This is perfect. Now, to something that you said with the unity part of it, that is absolutely something that we absolutely talk about here. So what made you go that direction? Was there a book you were handed? Was there a conversation that you had to kind of that awoke you to this just even idea that there was one thing experiencing itself subjectively?
One thing experience. How did I wake up to that? As I'm sure you can agree, when you're in that and you live that, it's like, okay, when did I not live that? That's the big question. I would say that I knew it viscerally before I knew it intellectually. So I've since been fascinated to learn the science of this. Like, I just like love that. But when I was a little kid and I was going through tumultuous times in my childhood with a lot of chaos in the home and stuff, and I couldn't get a sense of security at home. I couldn't get a sense of certainty at home. There was never a sense that, okay, tomorrow is going to be stable, or you're going to, like, there was no sense of what you would expect to get, that sense of security and love and protection. So I could either implode and suicide myself, which was an option at a certain time. I thought about that. Or I could find that connection and find that sense of certainty somewhere else. And for me, it was being in nature. For me, it was realizing that anytime I was on the brink of really hopelessness and giving up and saying, I want out of here, because there was a part of me that remembered that love is real. There was a part of me that remembered that there is order in the universe. As a little kid, I could go into nature and remember that there was something else. And in fact, part of the suicide was, I want back there. Like, I didn't really mean when I said I wanted to show up now. Like, I want back there because this is hell and I want back there. And every time I kind of was at that choice point to like make that decision, something would show up in my life that was like, no, you decided, you have to be here, you haven't done your mission. And I would stay. So it was kind of this visceral sense inside of me that there was this higher order, that there was something more. I mean, and this continued right through to, you know, one time I almost got lost. I almost died in a forest when I lived in British Columbia, and I decided to go to these hot springs in the middle of winter with a girlfriend, and we went down to the hot springs. There's no one else around because there's lots of snow, and we're in our bathing suits and we're in flip-flops, right? And here we are in the hot springs. This is fantastic. But we arrived there late, just as darkness was falling, and I had like zero sense of direction, and neither did she. And this was actually before cell phones. Dating myself. But so we were in the hot springs, and then we're like, oh, okay, I guess darkness is falling. We should find our way back to like where we wanted to set up our tent. And we thought we were going on the right path, and we were in pretty dense forest at this time. And we were like way going the wrong path. And make a long story short, we ended up walking for like 6 hours, and there was torrential rain. I only had a very light little, rain jacket to put over my bathing suit. Otherwise, I was just flip-flops and that's it. And, a bathing suit. And there was like, you could hear animals around us and stuff. And my friend, who didn't have this, she grew up in a great home. She grew up with lots of love around her. So she never really sought the divine in the way I did. And she was melting down. She was like, this is it. She was having panic attacks, which she never had before. She was melting down. But at this point, I had already gone through a lot of my own like questioning and wondering. And I was convinced I had something to do here, right? And then, but here I am, it's confusing because it's like, okay, we're clearly screwed because we don't know how to get back to where we're at. And I lost a shoe at one point. We almost fell down this really deep hole in the forest. And she's like panicking, and I'm like not crying, and I'm not losing it, because I'm like, you know what? This is not the point in the story where I die. Like on the play of my life, me being this person on this stage, like this is not the point where I exit. Like, I just know that. I don't know how I'm getting out of here. There isn't like something that's showing up, but like, I know this isn't where I'm exiting. And lo and behold, like in the middle of the night, this dude with his dog leaves Whistler, which was several miles up the road, gets in his car, and he has this intuition to go walking in the forest. So all of a sudden we see this dude in the thick of the forest walking his dog, and we connect with him, and he brings us to his truck, gives us hot chocolate. He waits until the night is over. He sleeps in his truck. We sleep in our tent, and he makes sure that we're okay. And then we part our ways. Right. And it was just like, that wasn't lost on me. Like, I realized, okay, there is a higher order. Like, the guy didn't even know why he was there. Right. And he could have freaking killed us. Like, he could have oh, I think I'm going to carve these people up and eat them. Like, he could have been a weirdo. Right. But he wasn't. And it just showed me, you know what? There is a divine order to things. And, but everything is perception too. I will say, my friend who didn't have that anchoring in a divinity of being ordered, she saw that rescuing as a close call to everything corrupting and imploding. And from that day on, she took medication for panic attacks. So what this shows me is that it's not the event, just like, okay, so I have a psychology degree and I've studied trauma and stuff like that, right? It's not that somebody abused you or that you were in a violent situation that fucks you up, right? It's how you frame that to yourself. And I'm not minimizing that bad shit happens to people and fucks them up. I get it. But it's how you hold that in you, right? What framework you have, right? Like, what is your framework around it? Is the world just is everything meaningless and it's all just stupid and we're just here and it has no meaning? That's one frame. But because I was in such a chaotic home, I had to reach for a different meaning. And that meaning actually carried me through. So I left that forest with the feeling of, holy shit, there is a higher power. There is some order to the universe. There is divine order. My friend left with, this is all crap, this is a piece of shit, and I'm just like spiraling downward, and I need to be on pharmaceuticals for the rest of my life. And that's where her reality. It's two different, we were in the same situation, but two different perceptions. And that's what I honor and I recognize. None is right, none is wrong. It's just how we perceive it, right?
Damn, you're absolutely right. And that is a fascinating story. And really, you can scale this up to, it's a great metaphor for what we're all experiencing right now, or did about 2 years ago, whatever, because that was kind of the event. Like the event, like what you experienced being lost in the woods at that time, it was the thing that happened in 2020, right? And so this really shook people that weren't ready for something like this. And so they're just both interesting shakeups, right? In your experience, that's how you took it. The other took it as, I barely made it out of this thing, and thank God pharmaceuticals are here to aid me in my recovery from this event. You transmuted it, like the alchemist you are, with the understanding you have, which is brilliant, into something positive, something you were in more understanding and comfort about. And really, this is how, again, this split has been received by a lot of folks. Now, it has shaken a lot of people off of medication, and so there's been a side, amplification of things as well. But this is a good example. It's a great metaphor of what happened to us in 2020, or for us rather, is how I'd like to put it. For us in 2020, and it really screwed a lot of people up. And this is one of the things I was talking about to, I forget who it was. We were on this kind of conversation, and I was saying, I feel kind of, not bad, but I'm definitely empathetic for folks like that who, like, it's challenging for us, and we know what's going on, you know what I mean? And they just have no clue what's going on and just being rocked from all directions, and Schumann resonance this, and all my friends are gone and doing mushrooms that, and they just have no idea what's going on, So it's been challenging but interesting, but great metaphor. And side personal note, I'm grateful you're here with us, and that whatever steered you in the direction for our encounter, I'm grateful that it existed and kept you alive at least long enough for us to connect. So thank you for hanging out.
Likewise, buddy. Likewise. Awesome.
So have you ever had any near-death experience or anything like that from any, have you ever attempted or gotten close and gotten called back, or what were kind of the divine interventions?
I used to listen to a lot of Metallica in my bedroom.
That'll do
it. fuck, that shit is dark, man. That shit is dark. Yeah. And since then, I've learned about sound vibration and how, holy shit, you can merge with that sound, and you can be in hell and be on earth by merging with vibration, right? So to answer your question, no, I have not had a near-death experience, but I have had sex. And I have merged with a reality that fucking was not here, man.
Go on.
So, and I've also done ayahuasca, but I would say sex is better. So, and a lot of the parallels about accessing a higher state through psychedelics and sex completely map together, like what your mindset is before the context is, that type of thing. So when I met my partner, I was in a very locked view of what sex was. I thought it was the antithesis of a spiritual experience. I thought those two things were separate. I happened to meet someone who, well, first of all, the reason why I was attracted to him was not like, oh my God, he has a hot body. Because I actually was like, I was one of those people that saw what relationships could do and how they could disempower you. And I felt like I'm never going to be sucked into that control mechanism. I'm going to be resilient and on my own. But the universe sometimes does weird things, like in the forest, right? Brings people together and you see them and you're like, oh my God, I think I know you. But you don't really know them. And you're like, I think I know you. And there was that recognition because I was used to seeing kind of through spiritual eyes when I was a kid, which I had to kind of give myself sanity. I could flip into that sense and kind of shut off my conscious mind. And when I first met him, I'm like, okay, I recognize something here, right? And that gave me the sense that I could trust this person. And thankfully, this person didn't have the religious frame that I had come into the world with or have been educated with. And he had an elevated view of what sex could be, right? And actually, I had my own traumatic experiences with sex. He had a woman who had done something really terrible. I don't mean to laugh, but he would laugh about it. But he could never have oral sex from a woman because he got freaking freaked out by what this, when he was a teenager, what someone had done to him. So we both had our hangups sexually when we first met, right? And even though he had been with a lot of women, there was like some places he wouldn't go. So we both had kind of a sense of discovering, okay, is there something more? And because we actually, when we first met, it was a long distance. I was in another country, like Canada and the United States. And so there's a lot of chance to kind of have a more of a felt understanding, connection about who we both are. And anyway, he started to break my paradigm when he said to me, I think Mary Magdalene was the greatest gift to the planet. And I think she held the keys to the planet. And I'm like, what? Wasn't she a prostitute? Like, what? And he's like, no, that was like a lie. And he handed me this book called The Woman with the Alabaster Jar by Margaret Starbird. And it's a scholarly book. And it kind of deconstructed all of that for me. And Jesus never really meant a lot to me when I was going through Catholic school, because I felt like, okay, he's this like dude that's way up there. And, and I just divorced myself from all of the, you got to feel bad and fearful of God. That didn't mean anything to me. When I was in nature, I didn't fear God. I didn't feel bad. I didn't live a life of I'm sinful. I felt really connected to a presence, right? But I didn't have like a sense of there being someone in the past that I could like connect with, right? But when I read this book about Mary Magdalene, I'm like, holy shit, like she felt like she was a real person. And it felt like it wasn't that she was this virginal thing. It was like she was a sexual woman and she was equal to Jesus. And that's what I felt, right? And okay, but I'm not in this incarnation. I'm like this kid that's gone through all this shit and, you know, with this real religious programming. So I started to, when I was a little kid, I felt like I connect to dead people really easily. When relatives died, I would give messages to my parents like, oh, Uncle Liam wants to say this. And it was always meaningful to them. Like, I just felt like I loved the other side more than the people here. The people here are like crazy mean, like, ah. But on the other side, they were loving. I could connect with them. So I would always do that. Like that was my go-to, right? And so when I read this book about Mary Magdalene, I started to feel like, I think I could connect with her. And so I started to like meditation and journaling, started to like reach out to her. And it was through that direct connection with her that I allowed. So there's this book called The Interconnected Universe by Irvin Lasco. And he talks about memory being in the field, not being in the brain. And so that really meant something to me. So I said, okay, I don't have a good representation of sexuality from my past, right? And if I'm just trying to remake myself sexually by this kid that was abused, there's not really very far for me to go. But if I can pick up on Mary Magdalene's sexual energy, like if that energy is in the field and anyone can access it, I'm not going to access my personal history on sex. I'm going to access her history on sex.
Hell yeah.
And so when I'm with my husband, I was like, okay, I'm going to bring her energy into my body. And I am now accessing from her. And rather than go through like 10 years of therapy and try to unravel myself, I didn't do that, right? I just merged with her being. And when I did that and I'm with him, and there is a sense of being able to access a reality beyond this dimension, right? Of being able to go beyond, and a feeling of complete a sense of unconditional love beyond just human love, right? And a sense of complete interconnect, like a feeling of vibrating so much in your whole being that you split apart, like you're no longer here, right? And just like the intense radiation of light, the whole thing. And that has given me the sense that this is why I go back to the Matrix movie too, the Matrix Resurrection. I really think that's giving us this path that it was always about accessing a state of bliss in a sexual union, in a loving union that brings us to this higher state, you know? So anyway.
Yeah, and bonus, it's technically a threesome. So congratulations. So how does sexuality cause the imprisonment of humanity? I mean, because this is something that, you know, taboos kind of put restraints on this. And I've had, Jenny Rivers on the show. I talk about this every time we talk about taboos because she's brilliant. But she talked about taboos being guardians to knowledge. And that's where the secrets are. Like, that's where the dope shit is found, is right on the other side of you not listening to what you're told, right?
Oh, you not listening to what you're told?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like from the system, like them telling you don't view sex in the way that you, Dr. Jenny,
view it. Yeah.
And so the system tells you, hey, don't do this. And so they put these taboos in place. And right on the other side of those taboos, like they're guardians for sacred knowledge. Like once you break free of those, there's some amazing stuff to be found on the other side of that.
Yes. And so let me just say about the threesome. So in the Tantra, you have this idea that you become the goddess and your partner becomes the god, and it's the two of you. what I see in the lost teachings of Jesus is essentially a trinity, right? Is that it's you representing the divine, it's your partner representing the divine, but very viscerally, you know that it's not just the two of you in the room anymore. There is the presence of a third. Absolutely, there is a presence of the third. In much the same way when, like, Rick Strassman was a Buddhist when he did DMT, right? And then he's like, holy shit, it's not a void. It's not like a void like I was taught. It's actually filled with life. It's filled with energy. It's filled with beings. And he had to really question that view. And it made him go back to like the Hebrew scripture and all of that. Anyway, I do believe that what you just said about on the you expressed it very well about on the other side
that's Jenny Rivers' thing. She's phenomenal. I'm just parroting her, but yeah, on the other side of taboos, that's where that beautiful knowledge is at. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and not to get into conspiracy theory or anything, but one could say,
bring it. We talk about all of it. Come on.
One could say that, you know, it was known all along that it was sexual connection that brought us there, and that how do you suppress and control humanity by suppressing that energy? And in patriarchal, you know, controlled, dominating societies do have this kind of juxtaposition with sex. On the one hand, it's everywhere in porn, which is a very kind of a domination type of view of sex. On the other hand, it's like you're not supposed to talk about it, and you're supposed to be like not even wanting it, and you know, it's like this juxtaposition, right? But you control a population by suppressing the sexual energy, not allowing a real sacred immersion of that energy, right? But in the Matrix movies, it talks about the Merovingians having a key to the Matrix. So what Margaret Starber talks about in her book, The Woman with the Alabaster Jar, is the Merovingians were the royal bloodline in France. They were kings in France. They held the royal bloodline of Mary and Jesus and Mary Magdalene, which the Matrix movie are kind of bringing back that whole thing, which links to the Knights Templars, which links to the Freemasons and all of that. And it's got corrupted. It's become very dark act, right? Where you do sacred sexual rituals to kill people and destroy them, to take their energy, to take the DMT, adrenochrome and all of that but they use sex. Why is sex used in those very dark rituals? Because the veil is thin in that act, right? And you can do it and create terror in the other person and basically destruct the other person. And you can access DMT, but as we know, with psychedelics, with all of this, you can have a bad trip and get some really dark entities that you're connecting with, right? Or you can have a good trip and have light and love and all of that, right? So if you're going into it with the intention of, I'm going to take from you, I'm going to control you and take your energy from you, because that comes from a state of lack, scarcity. You know, I don't have the energy, so I have to take from you. And if you do that, you're going to be accessing the veil. You're going to break through the veil, but you're doing it at a very low vibration, right? The other side of it is to what Neo and Trinity exemplify is complete open-heartedness, complete respect, complete love, complete devotion. They would die for each other. They would, they care for the other person almost as, more than themselves. Like there's this complete devotion and union, and that unites the world, that elevates the consciousness of everyone. It's not based on scarcity. It's based on unity. It's based on all of that. But what it shows in the movies is the Merovingians have the key. Why do they have the key to the matrix? Because the key was always this sacred sexual connection between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, that being suppressed and inverted, vilifying the feminine as just a whore, right? That she was just a paid prostitute, right? Elevating the celibate version of the male, elevating a celibate version of the Virgin Mary. And so we've lost the access to the potency of the sexual energy. It's been taken in the celibacy of Jesus, and it's been distorted in a control mechanism in the prostitute, right? But when the secrets that the Merovingians held and the Knights Templar and the Masons held was that this alchemy, when you really do access the sexual energy, there's an alchemy. This is the Philosopher's Stone. This is all of this, right? You access you break the veil, like you access the divine, you access the higher realm. And if we can distort sexuality in a culture and make people believe it's just about fucking and it's about power dynamics and pain and suffering, then they're never going to access the heightened state. And you know what? If they never access the heightened state, they're totally controllable. As the final scene in The Matrix Resurrection talks about, the sheeple don't want to be free. The sheeple want to be controlled. They want certainty. Well, if you're not able to access your true higher consciousness, what do you crave? You crave for someone to tell you what to do. Oh, I really want certainty because I have no certainty inside me. Oh, I really want control because I have none. But when you're able to access that directly, you're like, fuck you. I don't want to be told what to do. Like, I can access that myself, right? But the hierarchy of the church, the hierarchy of the elite institutions in our world, they want to distort that energy so that we don't access it. So we don't know that that really was the source, that really was it. And if we don't know, and if we're unaware, well, then we walk around being disconnected from it.
Could not agree more. It's a phenomenal way that you put it. And yes, the Matrix movies do portray, I never even thought of it as a Jesus, Mary Magdalene thing, connection. I knew the Jesus allegory was in there, but that's a brilliant way that you put it. So what about the folks that, like astrotheologists, who don't think that Jesus was necessarily a real person and that the Savior and all of the things of the Bible are really more analogous, like they're not real. Even in this, though, it could have been a story that was reappropriated to, just like you said, celibatize Jesus and prostatize Mary. And so it's this inversion of reality that we talk about quite a bit on here. And so, of course, it would have been apprehended and adapted to their needs, which is to do the opposite of what's actually true and freeing for you. Could not agree more, darling. Excellent call. So why then do you think that it is so suppressed? We know why at a high level, but in your opinion, do you think that there's this control system like a matrix here? And if so, like, what's it for?
Well, is there control system? I think everybody would agree. Last couple of years, like, totally, right? It's just coming out. Like, fuck, I got to wear a fucking mask. Like, holy fucking shit. Like, Philadelphia or something is going back to masks. Like,
really? I thought we were done with this. Aren't they done?
Yeah, I thought I heard it that just recently. But like, here's the deal. Like, they're going to come up with, it's always going to be some next thing, right? Until we break free. So your question was, do I think there's a matrix? Was that the question? What was the question?
Yeah, just like a control system in place. And what role do you think that their suppression of sex plays in that control system?
Well, if you see it the way that I see it, that the breaking free from the whole control mechanism is through re-envisioning sex, not in the way that it's held today. So the way that sex is talked about, even when they're trying to do it in schools today, it's talked about not in the way that I'm talking about it. I'm talking about it in a way that if you looked at the accessing a psychedelic state of consciousness, It is about being with the partner from a state of conscious intention that you're going to access a higher state. Let me just back up a second. In Michael Pollan's book about his big, thick book about plants and plant medicines and stuff, where he had shared his own journey. In one part of that, he talked about how we've lost connection with indigenous cultures and that we just use these things recreationally and we don't even realize how powerful they are and what they represent. They really represent being able to access expanded states of consciousness, expanded reality.
Come on.
And without the framework from indigenous cultures, we're kind of like all over the place. And some, people can have like really terrifying experiences and kind of go off the deep end, right? Well, I believe that absolutely parallels the subject of sex, because I believe our creator, however you envision that, has given us plants and has given our human body both with a very powerful psychedelic substance, not on accident, but with the intention that we were supposed to discover how friggin' powerful we are. And we were supposed to not walk around as little robots being told what to do. We were supposed to walk around as friggin' gods. We were supposed to walk around as enlightened beings and friggin' co-create this planet, not leaving just a few billionaires to create it and tell us what to do, but we were supposed to claim our divine sovereignty. And because religion has broken apart this idea that sex and spirituality are together, we don't have a framework. Not that we need a rule book, like you shouldn't do this. And we don't need a rule book, just like you don't need a rule book for psychedelics, but you need a framework, because without a sense of what's possible, you don't know that you can go there. So your body is equipped to access higher states of consciousness through sexual union. Every person's body is wired for that. But until someone says, okay, this is how your body works, this is what's possible, and this is the mindset you need, this is the setting that you need, like these are the kind of the prerequisites that help induce these possibilities, you don't know. You just see porn and you see, all these control mechanisms, and you think, okay, I'm supposed to like tie up my partner. I'm supposed to like do all these things. And that, not to judge any of that, but what bothers me is sometimes when women come to work with me in my courses, they think, oh, doing BDSM, like that's like the forbidden cool stuff, right? The like sappy lovemaking, that's like too religious. And I get what they're saying, like you want to break out of being, stuck in some kind of boring way of expressing yourself, but they don't know that it's actually the church that propagated that idea of pain and suffering during sex. They actually put that forth, and all of the BDSM that we see on porn today is actually totally in line with what the church wanted. So at a certain point in church history, women who were like married to Jesus carved into their body like different things to show their devotion to Jesus, like the mortification of the flesh, which shows up in bondage, discipline, sadomasochism, was absolutely, you could be canonized in the church if you whipped yourself, if you carved yourself. You could have automatic sainthood if you basically created intense pain and torture of your body, which is in essence BDSM. And what these actually, it was men and women who did this in the church at some point in history. They called it ecstasy. The pain was ecstasy. So when people come into my classes today and say, oh, I'm liberated because I'm doing the forbidden, I'm like doing this dark stuff, I'm like, don't you realize that forbidden is exactly what they want you to do? Because as soon as you, from a brain science perspective, as soon as you access a state of pain and suffering, right? You're going to have the opioid response kick in, which gives you a disassociated state, which is not the expanded state, the DMT state, that's going to access the higher dimensions. What that's going to do is, in essence, you might as well get into a car accident and go to the hospital in that kind of zoned out state. It's what your body does to protect you so you don't go into complete shock, right? But by willingly consenting to that kind of torture, and we call it erotic, we're seen as like liberated and cool, oh, well, I consented to it. It's, great. Well, fine, go ahead, consent to whatever you want, but you're part of the matrix when you engage in pain and suffering. You're stuck in the matrix. You're not getting out of the matrix. And I believe that was part of the control mechanism to have porn today kind of propagate what the church wanted, which was to keep us believing that pain, suffering is the way to liberation. And it's not. When you look at the physics of how the biophotons in our body, how the torsion feels, with the quantum entanglement. When you look at all of this, you must be in a state of bliss without suffering to access that. You must be in a state of bliss. So our society is so focused on suffering, so focused on martyring yourself. Born again Christians say, I'm saved by the blood of Jesus Christ. It was his suffering that liberated me. I don't believe Jesus Christ elevated suffering at all. When I read, which is the book that I have forthcoming, when I read the Gospel of Philip, I don't see at all an elevation of suffering as the path. What I see is an elevation of getting into your body, not denying the body like in a lot of traditions. A lot of traditions is you got to sit, you got to discipline your body, you got to overcome the body. The body is animalistic. The body desires are animalistic. Got to overcome the body, be really strict about this, and then you get liberated. Well, that's not what I see in the Gospel of Philip. The Gospel of Philip is get into your sensuality, get into being fully in pleasure, fully in sexual pleasure. And when you're fully embodied, that's when the default mode network shuts down. That's when you're able to access, as Aldous Huxley talked about in The Doors of Perception, our brain is a filter, right? Our brain is a filter. There's way more out there than we can ever perceive at any given moment. Dogs can hear sounds that we can't hear. Birds can see in the spectrum of light that we can't see. So there's way more out there than we can perceive. We would go crazy. I mean, people have schizophrenia that do perceive too much, right? We would go crazy if we perceived more. But for those moments when we're prepared, this is why we need a framework. When we're prepared, otherwise we can go psychotic. When we're prepared, we can access these states of unitive consciousness, not to live there all the time. If we live there all the time, then we lose touch with our contribution of the planet. We need to access these states of bliss consciousness, bring that into our body, and then to be able to go about in the world. And whatever our calling is, if your calling is to interview people and bring new ideas to the world and have great conversations, that's your contribution. And people have a high for doing, you get something from making your contribution to the planet. We're here to make that contribution, right? And it's to be able to access that state of bliss and then bring that into whatever you're doing so that you fulfill your part of the puzzle. And if we all fulfill our parts of the puzzle, the whole planet lifts up.
Now, let me ask you this, because I'm curious about it philosophically, your take on this. Now, we would all like things to be different here. We think child's cancer sucks. We hate the things that we go through and experience that make us who we are, but that's the flip side of that, right? The fact of who we are and that we can observe that there are things around us that we would like to change, we're only afforded the clarity of by having experienced that. So in my mind, and I've talked about this just briefly, but it seems like really there's nothing here to fix. And I know that kind of sucks, and I've said this before, but it seems that the way in which we learn in this place, because that's kind of how I tend to view this, just idealistically, would be that it's supposed to be this shitty. It's supposed to be this hard. You're supposed to figure it out and then make it better and then create something better later. But here, what we're experiencing, the matrix, is necessary for that development. So the question is do you think that's accurate? And if not, how would the next generation of people who have never experienced stuff like this gain the understanding of it, having not experienced it themselves?
Yeah, that's like a very powerful question. It's a very powerful thought, right? And I don't have the answer to that. And I mean, we can all think about that, right? But someone said to me that I heard someone said to me, we're talking about trauma, right? And they said, well, trauma has to happen. And I go, why? Well, trauma is the way that you learn. And I get that. But first of all, I don't wish, intense trauma on anyone. But that's a story that we have been told, that we have to go through like terrible things to evolve. Is that the only way to evolve, or is that something that we've all bought into, right? I do believe, like has been prophesized, that we're on the verge of going through a change in our planet. And I don't know, like the show by Greg Braden on Gaia that was on for a while, and he talked about in some of his shows that there was a time where we were more evolved on the planet. And that kind of makes sense, because things like the pyramids and different things, they don't make sense from our logical mind. Were these people accessing, and, of course, ancient aliens and all of that, I get it. But the time that they built the pyramids, they also worshiped Isis. And Isis had, yes, there were plant medicines, but there was also the idea of rebirth through hieros gamas, through sexual union, right? There was also this idea that they would have these sacred sexual rituals where they would evoke a higher presence, where it brought fertility to the land, where it brought, the crops were better and all of this. But it also bestowed power, earthly power, on the king, right? That he was able to access an unseen power for to lead by having sex with the person that was representing the divine feminine. But can we right now, life is about struggle, right? You work hard and you try to pay your taxes if you still believe in that, but you work hard. Like, life is hard, and then you die, right? You live your life to pay bills, and then you die, right? If you look at those videos of those, if like his show, for instance, you get this sense that people didn't live like that in the past. Like, they lived with the sense that I'm here to evolve myself, like I'm here to make a contribution. They didn't live with this sense of slavery. But through our ego ruling the world, and you could say patriarchy, right? Kind of people's egos running out of control with this sense of kind of competing with the divinity, right? They're going to put Neuralink in our brain because they think that they can do better than our divine design, right? They're going to merge us with machines because they can do better than the creation that is us, right? So there's this ego that is running the earth right now, but it's also running us into the ground. And before that can happen, there's this opportunity for us to claim our spiritual sovereignty. I do believe that, we haven't seen that in any recent time where we lived at an elevated state, but that is the divine design for humanity. I believe that is why we're here. And in the book, The Gospel of Philip, it talks about we are here to resurrect. And what does resurrect mean? It's not that you die and then you come back to life. It's that you, kind of like what we talk about in psychedelics, you have ego dissolution, right? Ego death. You access that state that's beyond the personal self. And when you access that state that's beyond the personal self, you live as a, quote, enlightened being. Not that you stop doing daily activities like, work in the world and stuff like that, but you do it from a different state of consciousness. And I think we're at this time because, listen, we are either going to surrender to elite forces that really want this new world order and just like, okay, do it. Okay, we'll be your little gopher slave for that. Or we're going to say, no, we claim our divine sovereignty. We are not going to participate in your reality. And we're creating something new. And I think we are at this incredible choice point. We are here to make the difference. This idea that someone is going to save us is what's a lot of people still believe, regardless of whether they're religious or not, right? And that is the antithesis of what the Matrix movie's talking about, what the Gospel of Philip's talking about. It's talking about we have to resurrect within. And when we realize our own power, then we walk as a different type of human on the planet. And listen, I love psychedelics, but why I think it's missing the boat as the evolution for humanity is that we weren't meant to be alone. And we weren't meant to just have, I got my own enlightenment, like, fuck you, I got my own. It wasn't meant to be about that. It was the reason why I like the Matrix story and the Matrix Resurrection is I believe that showing that if we absolutely love someone almost more than ourselves and we devote ourselves to that relationship, not out of codependency, but out of I know who I am. I have a direct relationship with my own higher self. You know who you are. But when we come together, and we know this even through science, through the physics of two electromagnetic fields coming together, emerging, and what happens in terms of the energy that's generated when two beings who have their heart open, who have sex, actually are joined in that union. There is what it shows in the Matrix movie when Neo touches Trinity at a certain point, there's an explosion of light. That's science. That's science, right? So there is no darkness that can suppress humanity when we have a sense of open-heartedness and realize we can access this higher state through loving connection. And listen, I'm all about freedom of choice, but there is something very special between a man and a woman. There's something very special, right? And it's not just the Jungian thing of accessing your internal masculine, feminine. Fine, got it, perfect. But there's something very special about a man accessing his masculinity, a woman accessing her femininity, and then having a open-hearted connection and actually a physical connection. There is something scientifically, spiritually out of this world powerful that it would change the planet if we realize the power of that.
It's a deep rabbit hole, and I absolutely love the way that you communicate about this topic, because this is a tricky one. And this is an interesting one, but it's very, very important. The way that you describe, I love your psychedelic cervix thing, by the way. Say the full title of that for the audience.
Oh, so the Psychedelic Cervix is a course that I teach. Yeah.
It's so cool. Okay. And of course, all the ways, guys, to find her are going to be linked down in the show notes. So just, I want to close with your final thoughts on just what we can do to move forward. Is this an individual thing that we have to individually embark on, or is this a co-collective creation, or is there a bit of both?
Well, I think it's individual and collective. And I think that religion has suppressed our true awakening to a certain extent, but we also, as Michael Pollan said in his book, we need guidelines. We need a framework. We need to be able to view the secret codes to this waking up. I believe the Gospel of Philip contains those secret codes. It contains what was suppressed from the Merovingians. And this is what I'm bringing out in The Secrets, say the book that you'll link down below, right? I'm bringing that out in that book to really show people that there was a hidden, suppressed message that Jesus showed up on the planet, not to give us a bunch of rules about what we shouldn't do, and not to even put himself as the guy, right? But to give an example, and even if he didn't live, fine, cool, whatever, right? But you can use this as a story, as a metaphor. And when you realize his co-equal of Mary Magdalene, you can use that story as a metaphor of waking up. And it's actually, it parallels the Trinity and Neo story. That when we realize that we don't do this on our own, we do this through loving, open-hearted connection. And when our heart brain is in coherence, right? The work of heart math, but then we have social coherence through the connection with another person. This creates global coherence for the planet, but it all starts with us realizing the divine is within us, but then not just saying, oh, it's about my bliss. It's about how much more bliss can I have for myself? The way it works is that if you try to just do it for yourself, it dissipates. But if you've seen the rebound effect that Lynn McTaggart talks about, when you actually send that vibration out to another person, it magnifies it back to yourself. So the way to even go higher than what you have before is to share that vibration with another person. And when you do it, not just, I'm going to sit across from someone and meditate and send that, that's fine. But what we know is when you do it with a physical sexual union, there are specific ways your brain is hardwired through the rhythmic movement of intercourse, through the touch, physical touch. All of that activates, it trips circuits in your brain to shut down the task-oriented brain, to access a higher state of consciousness, to open the pineal gland, to trigger the release of dimethyltryptamine, all of that, which brings us into the most evolved state. That's what I believe.
Dr. Jenny Martin, thank you so much. Of course, Jesus' secret saying about sacred sexuality is going to be located down in the show notes, as well as all of the ways to find you. You're fascinating. We have so much more to talk about, so I will definitely be inviting you back on. So thank you so much for your time again. I really appreciate it. This is so cool.
Thank you so much. I loved it. It's so cool what you're doing here. Thank you.
What an incredible, incredible woman. Dr. Jenny Martin, and all the ways to find her are located down in the show notes. Make sure that you guys check out her book, Jesus' Secret Saying About Sacred Sexuality, as well as her podcast, Why Didn't I Know Podcast. And it's all super awesome, all located down in the show notes. Cannot thank her enough for coming by, and we will definitely invite her back. So, guys, down there located in the show notes as well is our resource links, Food Forest Abundance, Get That Freedom from Fear on, Libsyn if you'd like to start your own podcast, and as well, if you are going to feed the beast that is Amazon, run it through our link. It helps the show. Also down there is Opus. Opus is the Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support, a phenomenal resource for anybody looking to reach out and connect in that way. Also located down there, guys, is going to be expandingrealitypodcast.com. That is going to be links to all the socials. Lives are replayed there. You can jump on the store and check out the merch, as well as the collaborations, other shows that I've been grateful to be a part of. All that stuff is linked and up there, damn near all of it for free. If you want to go check that out, linked down in the show notes. If you would like to support the show, you can do that at the Expansive Insider section on that. There's a bunch of bonus stuff and just a really cool way to help the show, and I'm truly grateful for everybody that signed up and is enjoying that. So guys, go out into this incredibly beautiful place, whatever the hell it is, and y'all just pick up a piece of litter. Go ahead and be nice to everybody that you come across, no matter what their state is. It's just a mirror to you, right? So let's have a little extra patience with the other expressions of us that we come across, just kind of throwing that out there. As well as, y'all get the hell out of the left-hand lane, It's a pain in the ass, so if you got somebody wanting to pass, just move on over. We'll be right by, and you can hop back over there and do whatever the hell you were doing. Go ahead and also, entertain the idea of just picking up somebody's grocery bill every now and then, or buying them a coffee or a meal, something like that. Guys, that energetic ripple is so powerful, and it's incredible. Yeah, I just highly recommend it because it's just one of the coolest ways to really change somebody's day that you know, air quotes, don't know, right? But man, think of the impact that makes. It's just amazing, and so highly recommend. It's such a small thing, but damn it, it goes so far. Okay, and other than that, guys, go, you know what I'm gonna say? Say it every time, because I mean it every damn time. Go out into this beautiful ass place, whatever the hell it is, and y'all just be good to one another. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
This morning in the Atlanta airport, no one's missing a meal on Mac Wilburn's watch. With 11 restaurants to serve passengers, he's got dining for every destination. And it all started when Mac talked with First Horizon Bank about opening a franchise in the airport. Now it's open for business and cleared for takeoff. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Mac. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.